Well, there you are. You have arrived. Welcome, dreamer, to Cozy Tales Collective, where time slows, whispers take shape, and every flower has a story to tell. The fountain hums its quiet melody just beyond the bend, and a cozy nook awaits beneath the willow's embrace, perfect for those who dream and wonder. But before we begin, subscribe to this channel and comment where you are listening from. But before we begin, let's settle into place. Take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. Let the day melt away as you sink into a place of comfort and stillness. Feel the weight of your body resting against your bed, fully supported, fully at ease. Close your eyes and soften your breath. With each inhale, invite peace. With each exhale, release any lingering tension. Let go of the thoughts of the day. They can wait until tomorrow. Right now, all that matters is this moment. Imagine a warm, gentle light surrounding you, like a soft blanket of calm. It soothes your mind, relaxes your muscles, and welcomes you into a space of quiet serenity. Your mind is open yet at peace, ready to drift into a world of imagination. Soon a story will begin, a gentle journey to guide you into deep, restful sleep. Take one more deep breath in and let it go. You are safe, you are relaxed, and you are ready to dream. Now let the story begin. I have always admired great speakers, their confidence, the way their voices carry across a room, commanding attention without effort. It's mesmerizing. I used to sit in conferences or team meetings, watching them own the stage, weaving words into ideas that captivated audiences. I longed for that kind of power, that effortless ability to command respect and inspire others. But longing and living are two different things. And for me, the mere thought of standing in front of a crowd made my palms sweat, my throat close up, and my mind go blank. It had always been that way. I was the kind of person who loved working behind the scenes, quiet, diligent, and capable, but never the voice of the project. In school, I dodged presentations. At work, I strategically positioned myself to avoid leading discussions. I did my job well, but always in the shadows. And then it happened, the moment that shattered my comfort zone. It was a routine morning at the office when my manager, Carlos, asked me to present a quarterly report in our team meeting. I hadn't prepared for it, hadn't planned for it. My stomach twisted into knots as I stood up, clutching the printed reports like a lifeline. The room swam before my eyes. My heart pounded against my ribs, loud and unrelenting. "Go ahead, Yamilet," Carlos encouraged. The expectation in his voice sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting, expecting. My mind went blank. My breath came in short, rapid bursts. It was as if my body had locked itself in an invisible cage, trapping my voice inside. The silence stretched painfully long until finally Carlos stepped in and smoothly took over the presentation. I could feel the embarrassment burn its way up my neck. I sank back into my chair, humiliated. That night, I replayed the scene over and over in my head. The way my colleagues had exchanged awkward glances, how I had sat there afterward feeling small and useless. I had let fear control me, and it wasn't the first time. But something about this particular failure stung deeper. Maybe because it had happened in my professional life, in front of people whose respect I wanted. Maybe because I could see the invisible ceiling this fear had placed on my career. Either way, I knew something had to change. For the first time in my life, I admitted the truth. My fear of public speaking was holding me back. The thought made my stomach twist. I had always avoided confrontation with my fears, but this time, I couldn't just bury it and move on. This time I needed to fight back. That night I did something reckless, something that made my hands tremble as I clicked submit. I had signed up for a public speaking competition happening in 6 months. 6 months to go from frozen silence to standing in front of a crowd, speaking with confidence. It felt impossible. It felt terrifying. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let fear win. I sat across from James at the coffee shop, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of chamomile tea. The scent was soothing, but my nerves buzzed beneath my skin. I had just laid out my plan for him. Every detail, every hope I had clung to like a lifeline. His reaction would either fortify me or unravel me completely. James leaned back in his chair, his hazel eyes scanning my face with quiet thoughtfulness. "Yami, I think it's a brilliant idea," he finally said, his lips curling into a slow smile. "You have a way with words. You always have. Why shouldn't you go for it?" His words warmed me, but that warmth was fragile, too easily threatened by the lingering ghosts of my past. Before I could respond, a scoff from the table beside us shattered the moment. Leo. Of course he had been listening. He never could resist an opportunity to needle me. "Seriously, Yamilet? You? Public speaking? Do you not remember middle school?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Because I do. And so does everyone who had to sit through your speech on... what was it again? Oh, right. The influence of mythology on modern storytelling. A real page-turner, that one." Heat rushed to my face. That was years ago, Leo. And yet, still so painfully vivid, he mused, sipping his coffee as if he hadn't just unearthed my most humiliating memory. "You froze halfway through, started stuttering, then, oh, the best part, you ran off the stage." He grinned. Classic. James shot him a glare, but it did little to stop the flood of doubt seeping into my bones. My fingers tightened around my cup. Leo wasn't wrong. That memory had haunted me for years. The laughter, the embarrassment, the feeling of my throat locking up while all eyes were on me. I had vowed never to put myself in that position again. And yet, here I was, willingly stepping into the same arena that had once chewed me up and spit me out. James reached across the table, placing a hand over mine. "Yami, that was a long time ago. You're different now, more prepared, more confident. Don't let him get in your head. But Leo's words had already taken root. What if he's right? I murmured. What if I'm just setting myself up for another disaster? James shook his head. You can't let one bad experience define you. Everyone fails. But the ones who matter, they try again. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the echoes of my past were loud, whispering doubt into every corner of my mind. Could I really do this? Or was I just repeating an old mistake, setting myself up for another failure? Leo smirked, tapping his fingers against the table. Well, if nothing else, it'll be entertaining. Just don't trip over your words, again. I swallowed hard, unsure if my trembling was from anger or fear. Maybe both. I couldn't get the sound of my own ragged breathing out of my head. My chest had tightened so much that it felt like steel bands were wrapped around my ribs, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pull in enough air. It had taken Professor Woods gently guiding me to a seat, his voice calm but firm, to help me find my breath again. And even then, I had kept my eyes down, too ashamed to look at anyone, especially Olivia. She hadn't even tried to hide her smirk. Some people just aren't cut out for this, she had murmured, just loud enough for me to hear as she turned back toward the rest of the workshop. I had clenched my fists, but said nothing. What was there to say? She was right. As soon as the workshop ended, I had bolted. I didn't want to be around any of them, people who knew how to speak, how to command a room, how to be someone that mattered. I wasn't like them. I wasn't even sure why I had signed up in the first place. I had spent the night debating whether or not I should quit. I wanted to quit. I really, really did. But when I woke up the next morning, still feeling the burn of Olivia's words, I knew I couldn't. Because if I quit, that meant she was right. That meant I really wasn't cut out for this. And if that were true, then what else wasn't I cut out for? Standing up for myself, chasing my dreams, proving to myself that I wasn't just some invisible girl who faded into the background. I didn't want to be invisible anymore, so I went back. Professor Woods didn't say anything when I walked into the classroom the next day, but the small nod he gave me said enough. He had seen students struggle before. He had seen them break under the pressure and never return. But I had. And maybe that counted for something. The lesson was on body language. Olivia, of course, volunteered to go first, gliding to the front of the room like she belonged there. She delivered a mock speech with perfect posture, her hands moving with the kind of grace that only came from confidence. When she finished, Professor Woods gave her some pointers, but it was clear she didn't need them. I could feel my stomach tightening as other students took their turns. Then Professor Woods called my name. I stood up slowly, my legs already trembling. "Take your time, Yamilet," he said. "Just focus on standing still first." I walked to the front of the room, feeling every pair of eyes on me, waiting for me to fail. My fingers twitched at my sides. I clasped them together, then quickly unclasped them when I realized how stiff I looked. I swallowed hard. "You don't have to speak yet," Professor Woods said, reading my panic. Just stand there. Get comfortable with the space. Comfortable? How could I be comfortable when my heart was slamming against my ribs? But I tried. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, taking slow, measured breaths. My eyes flickered to Olivia. She was watching me, waiting for the moment I crumbled again. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "Okay," Professor Woods finally said. "That's enough for today. Good job." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't much, but it was something. I had stood there. I hadn't run. That was a start. The next few days were a series of small victories and humiliating setbacks. I practiced speaking in front of a mirror, trying to fix the stiffness in my posture. I whispered words under my breath on the bus, in the hallways, anywhere I could. In class, I still stumbled. My voice shook. I forgot words. But I kept going. Olivia still made her little comments. She didn't need to say much, just a glance, a smirk, a raised eyebrow when I faltered. But I learned to ignore her, or at least I pretended to. One evening, as I sat alone in the library, poring over videos of great speakers, a voice interrupted my thoughts. "You're really not giving up, huh?" I looked up. It was Eric, one of the other students in the workshop. He was one of the quieter ones, but unlike Olivia, he didn't look at me like I was hopeless. "No," I said, though I wasn't sure if it was defiance or exhaustion speaking. He grinned. "Good, because I think you're getting better." I blinked. "You do?" "Yeah, you're standing taller. You don't look like you're about to pass out anymore. That's progress." I let out a small, incredulous laugh. It was the first real encouragement I had received, and I clung to it like a lifeline. The final workshop session arrived quicker than I expected. Each of us was supposed to deliver a short speech on a topic of our choice. I had spent the entire night rehearsing, but I still felt like my legs were made of lead as I walked into the classroom. One by one, students went up. Olivia, of course, went last, giving a flawless, poised performance. When she finished, she turned and gave me a look. "Yamilet," Professor Woods called. I stood, my hands damp with sweat. I walked to the front, heart pounding. For a moment I considered running. But then I thought of all the nights I had spent practicing, all the times I had stumbled but kept going. And I thought of Eric's words. I took a breath. And then I spoke. My voice shook at first, but I pushed through. I focused on my words, on my message, on the reason I was here in the first place. I wasn't as polished as Olivia. I still fidgeted a little, but I didn't stop. When I finished, there was silence, then a few hesitant claps, and then more. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it was something. Professor Woods gave me a small nod, the same one he had given me that second day. "Well done, Yamilet." I turned, catching Olivia's expression. For the first time she looked surprised, maybe even a little impressed. I didn't need her approval. I never had. But it still felt good to see it. As I walked back to my seat, Eric gave me a thumbs up, and for the first time I believed it. I had stumbled. I had nearly fallen. But I had taken my first real step, and I wasn't stopping now. I took a deep breath, staring at my reflection in the mirror. James stood behind me, his arms crossed as he watched with a patient expression. "Again," he said, his voice steady but encouraging. I swallowed hard and cleared my throat. "Confidence is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it," I began, reciting the line I had rehearsed countless times. My voice wavered slightly, but I pushed on. For years I let fear dictate my choices, my actions, my voice. But no more. James nodded approvingly. "Better. You hesitated less this time, but remember, it's not just about the words. It's about how you say them. Believe in what you're saying, Yamilet. Otherwise, no one else will." I exhaled, feeling the tightness in my chest lessen just a little. Public speaking had always been my Achilles heel. But if I wanted to grow, I had to face it. That much was clear. The real test came sooner than I expected. Professor Woods had been watching my progress, or lack thereof, and decided it was time for a challenge. "Yamilet," he said after class, his expression unreadable. "You're ready for the next step. Tomorrow you will deliver an impromptu speech in front of an audience. No preparation, no notes, just you, your thoughts, and your voice." My stomach clenched. "Tomorrow?" He nodded. "You've been practicing in front of the mirror, small groups. Now it's time to push yourself further." I wanted to protest, to argue that I wasn't ready. But the truth was, I would never feel ready. If I waited for readiness, I would be waiting forever. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, my mind conjuring every possible worst-case scenario. What if I froze? What if they laughed? What if I failed? The next day arrived far too quickly. James met me outside the auditorium, his expression reassuring. "You've got this. Just remember to breathe." I nodded, but my heart pounded like a war drum as I stepped inside. The audience consisted of strangers, students from other classes, faculty members, even a few unfamiliar faces that could have been visitors. I stood at the front, my palms clammy. "Yamilet, your topic is..." Professor Woods glanced at the slip of paper in his hand. "The fire within." I swallowed. The fire within. What did that even mean? My mind blanked, and for a terrifying moment all I could hear was the rush of my own pulse. Then James's words echoed in my mind. "Believe in what you're saying." I took a deep breath and let the words come. "Fear has always been my greatest enemy," I admitted, my voice raw. "It tells me I'm not good enough, that I should stay silent, that speaking up will only bring humiliation." I scanned the faces before me, searching for some kind of anchor. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that fear only has power if you let it. And deep inside, we all have something stronger, a fire that refuses to be extinguished. The words poured out of me, unplanned but honest. The fire within is the part of us that pushes forward when everything else tells us to stop. It's the reason we fight for our dreams, for our voices, for ourselves. And today, I choose to feed that fire. The room was silent for a moment, then applause erupted. I blinked in shock, my breath coming in uneven gasps. Had I actually done it? James met me afterward, grinning. "You didn't just do it, you owned it." I let out a shaky laugh, the weight on my chest lifting. Maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. I took a deep breath, willing my heart to slow down as I gripped the edges of the podium. The lights above buzzed softly, casting a faint glow on the practice stage. My voice trembled as I started speaking, the words carefully memorized, yet feeling foreign as they rolled off my tongue. I could feel Olivia's eyes on me from the back of the room, sharp and calculating. And that is why resilience is not just about enduring hardship, but transforming through it, I concluded, my throat dry. Silence. Not the appreciative, contemplative silence I had hoped for, but a void that swallowed my words whole. My stomach twisted. I knew I had faltered. I had hesitated on key phrases, stumbled over my own thoughts, and worst of all, I had let my nerves win. Then Olivia's slow clap rang out. "Well, that was something," she drawled, pushing off the wall and sauntering towards me. "I mean, if you were trying to redefine mediocre, you might have succeeded." I clenched my hands into fists, nails pressing into my palms. I wanted to shake off her words, tell myself that her opinion didn't matter, but it did. It always did. Olivia wasn't just another competitor. She was the one everyone expected to win, the one with the flawless speeches and effortless confidence, and I was the underdog, the wild card everyone barely noticed until I messed up. My pulse pounded in my ears as she walked past me, her perfume lingering in the air. "I'd rethink the competition if I were you," she added, almost as an afterthought. "It'd be a shame to embarrass yourself any further." A lump formed in my throat. I turned away, blinking rapidly, refusing to let her see how much she had gotten to me. The moment I left the practice room, I made a beeline for the nearest exit. The crisp evening air hit my face, and I inhaled deeply, hoping it would clear my mind. But my thoughts twisted into a tight knot, pulling me down a familiar spiral. Maybe Olivia was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I should just quit. I sank onto a bench, staring at the darkened sky above. Stars flickered distantly, indifferent to my turmoil. I had worked so hard, clawed my way up from nothing, yet every stumble felt like proof that I wasn't good enough. The cracks in my confidence were widening, threatening to shatter everything I had built. "Yami?" I turned sharply at the voice. Diego stood a few feet away, concern etched onto his face. His presence was steady, grounding. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside me. I hesitated before shaking my head. "I bombed my practice speech," I admitted. "And Olivia—" Diego groaned. "Let me guess, she was her usual charming self?" A wry smile tugged at my lips. "Something like that." He nudged my shoulder. "She's just scared of you." I scoffed. "Yeah, right. She barely even sees me as competition." "That's where you're wrong." Diego leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "People like Olivia don't waste time tearing down people who don't matter." The fact that she's trying to shake you means she knows you're a threat. His words lingered in the air between us, nudging at something deep inside me. Could it be true? Had my progress unsettled Olivia enough for her to see me as a rival? I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. What if I get up there and fail? What if I make a fool of myself? Diego turned to me, his gaze steady. Then you get up and try again. I let out a slow breath. Maybe it wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was about proving to myself that I could stand my ground, even when my confidence wavered. The competition wasn't just about winning. It was about fighting for the belief that I belonged here, and I wasn't ready to give up just yet. The weight of Leo's words lingered in my chest long after our conversation ended. His confession, raw and unfiltered, had peeled away layers of doubt I hadn't even realized I was carrying. He wasn't questioning my ability. He was battling the echoes of his own failures, the ghosts of chances he had let slip away. And somehow, in his struggle, I found clarity in my own. Failure wasn't a condemnation. It was a lesson, a stepping stone, a necessary pain before growth. I inhaled deeply, the air filling my lungs with a renewed sense of purpose. I had spent so long fearing mistakes that I had forgotten they were part of the process. I had been so focused on getting everything right that I had lost sight of the bigger picture. I wasn't here to be perfect. I was here to become better. The next morning I woke up feeling lighter. My feet found the ground with more certainty. My heart beat with more steadiness. I wasn't magically fearless, but I was ready to move forward despite my fear, and that was enough. I walked into the studio with a new mindset, one that replaced hesitation with curiosity. Instead of dreading critique, I welcomed it. Instead of shrinking under pressure, I leaned into it. And the more I did, the more I realized how much room I had to grow. Leo noticed the change almost immediately. "Something's different about you today," he said, watching as I stretched before practice. I grinned. "Yeah, I think I finally stopped running from my own mistakes." He tilted his head, arms crossed over his chest. And I think I'm finally ready to learn from them." The nod he gave me wasn't just one of approval, it was one of understanding. Leo had been where I was. He knew what it meant to break free from the fear of failing. And in that silent moment, I knew he was proud of me. Training took on a different energy. I stopped fixating on the things I couldn't do and started focusing on what I could improve. Each fall became an opportunity to refine my technique. Each misstep taught me something new about my body's limits and how to push past them. My failures weren't roadblocks anymore. They were directions pointing me toward progress. One evening, after an especially grueling session, I sat by the edge of the practice floor, my muscles aching but my spirit soaring. Leo sat beside me, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he began, "the hardest thing about growth isn't failing. It's accepting that you're not supposed to be perfect from the start." I glanced at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "I think I finally get that now," A small smile tugged at his lips. Good, because once you do, there's nothing that can stop you. And he was right. The weeks that followed weren't easy. There were moments when I stumbled, moments when old doubts tried to creep back in. But each time I reminded myself, growth isn't linear. I wasn't supposed to get everything right all at once. I just had to keep moving forward. One day, during a particularly intense session, I executed a combination I had struggled with for weeks. As I landed the final step, I barely recognized the person staring back at me in the mirror. She was stronger, more confident, more sure of herself than she had ever been. Leo clapped from across the room. "Told you," he said, grinning. "Nothing can stop you now." I smiled, the truth of his words settling deep in my bones. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of failing. I was excited to see how far I could go. As I stood backstage, the heat of the stage lights seeped through the curtain, warming my skin. My hands trembled slightly, and my heart pounded against my ribcage like a drum demanding to be heard. This was it, the moment I had spent countless hours preparing for. I inhaled deeply, closing my eyes for a brief moment, trying to drown out the murmur of the crowd beyond the heavy drapes. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, oscillating between excitement and fear. Now, standing here on the precipice of something significant, I felt the weight of my journey pressing down on me. I remembered the struggles, the self-doubt, the nights I had spent practicing my speech in front of the mirror, convincing myself I had something worth saying. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, calling my name. A hush fell over the audience as I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the polished wood of the stage floor. The bright overhead lights momentarily blinded me, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw the faces of the audience members staring back expectantly. This was my moment, my chance to tell my story, to share the truth that had shaped me. I exhaled, centering myself. I gripped the edges of the podium and began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I have spent most of my life afraid of failure, afraid of not being enough, afraid that the voice inside me wasn't worth listening to. A pause. I let the words sink in, glancing across the room. Some faces were unreadable. Others were already nodding in quiet understanding. But today, I stand here not because I have conquered fear, but because I have learned to walk beside it. Fear, I've realized, isn't the enemy. It is the shadow that reminds us we are standing in the light. A murmur rippled through the audience. I continued, my words pouring out like a river that had finally broken through the dam. There were times when I wanted to quit. Times when I believed the little voice in my head that told me I wasn't good enough. I listened to it for too long, allowed it to dictate my choices, my dreams. Until one day I realized something. Fear thrives in silence, but courage is found in speaking up. I took a breath, steadying myself. The room was completely silent now. They were listening. They were with me. Today I choose courage, Not because I am fearless, but because I refuse to let fear keep me silent any longer. And then it happened. The moment that could have unraveled everything. A slight crack in my voice, an almost imperceptible tremor that threatened to betray my composure. For a split second, panic surged through me. Would they notice? Would they think I was weak? But instead of letting it consume me, I embraced it. I let the vulnerability settle, let it remind me that I was human. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, inhaled, and pressed forward. Fear will always be there, but so will courage. And today, I choose courage. As I spoke my final words, I felt a shift in the room, a swell of emotion, a collective inhale, and then the applause. It started slow, then grew, wave after wave of sound crashing over me. I blinked back the sting of tears, allowing a smile to break through. As I stepped off the stage, I knew that I had done it. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but authentically. And that, more than anything, was enough. Standing on that stage, my heart pounded so loudly that I thought the microphone might pick up the sound. The auditorium was still, waiting. I had just placed third in the national speech competition, not first, not second, but third. And yet, as I stood there, feeling the weight of months of practice, the struggle of self-doubt, and the fear that had once paralyzed me, I realized something incredible. I didn't feel like a failure. Olivia was the first to approach me after the competition. Her presence alone had once sent me into a spiral of self-comparison and anxiety. But today, as she reached out and shook my hand, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't before. Pride. "You've come a long way, Yamilet," she said, her voice steady, kind. "I've been watching you grow, and I just want you to know that what you did today was impressive." I blinked, momentarily unsure if I had misheard her. "Thank you," I said, and for the first time I truly believed I had earned that praise. Professor Woods was waiting just beyond Olivia. His usual measured expression was replaced with something softer, something that resembled satisfaction. "I hope you realize now that winning isn't everything," he said. "You commanded that stage, Yamilet. More importantly, you inspired people." I exhaled, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease. I didn't think I could do it. I was so afraid. "And yet, you did it anyway." He nodded. "That's what matters." I carried those words with me in the days that followed. I had walked onto that stage fearing I wasn't enough, but I had left knowing that I was. That realization didn't erase my fear entirely, but it gave me something more important: the courage to move forward in spite of it. Weeks later, I found myself standing before a new audience, this time in a university lecture hall. I had been invited to speak to a group of aspiring public speakers, students who were just beginning their journeys, students who, like me, had once believed they didn't belong in front of a crowd. The murmurs of conversation faded as I approached the podium. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar nervous flutter in my stomach. But this time, I didn't let it consume me. Instead, I welcomed it. understanding that fear was not my enemy. It was proof that I was pushing my limits, growing. I smiled at the audience. I want to start by saying this. Fear never truly disappears. It lingers in the background, whispering doubts. But if you let it, it can also push you to become stronger. As I spoke, I saw recognition in the eyes of those before me. I saw versions of myself in them, uncertain, hesitant, but yearning to find their voices. And I realized in that moment that my journey wasn't just about me. It was about them, about everyone who had ever felt silenced by their own insecurities. I didn't win first place in the competition, but I had won something far greater, the ability to stand before others, not without fear, but with the courage to face it.